Welcome to our Biz Huddle podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Cuthbert, Creative Director at Baker Creative. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please hit subscribe so you can get notified when new content comes out. Please share this with anyone who could be inspired by it. Welcome, Senator. It's so exciting to have you back again.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, thank you for coming.
I appreciate you reaching out, and it's always fun to talk with you.
Yeah.
And it's I'm just looking forward to continuing the service and hopefully, and trying to keep people on a positive positive note. I've been around long enough and done politics for almost 20 years now to know that everything swings back and forth, and when it's very tough, and we either see things, hear things we either are confused by, don't like, or are afraid of. The most important thing is not to lose hope, and to just stay in it, stay informed, be involved, because ultimately we live in a democracy, and the democracy is of, by, and for the people. And so when we're very troubled by things and we say, well, who's going to fix that? It's part of the way I ended up getting involved to begin with. I started as a volunteer, was because I realized that I was one of the people, somebody should do something about that. I was one of the somebodies, and I think everyone is one of the somebodies, and there's things we can do, small and large, even if it's just reaching out to a neighbor and checking in with them and saying, how you doing today? Because I'm hearing from people sometimes that they feel like all they're seeing on the news and everything is people fighting with each other.
Yes, and I don't
people
think
calling each other names or separating them into categories. Knock on your neighbor's door and just say, hey, how you doing? I just wanted to check on you, nothing other than that. And I think it definitely makes a difference. So I think we can all make a difference by connecting one-on-one with each other. And I think that takes the place of the angry, hateful, nasty, and we'll move through it. We'll get through it.
And I think that a lot of that makes news, right? So they want to show like it's supercharged and it's like, oh my God, what's happening? But there's no news if everybody's kumbaya.
It's funny you say that. I always tell people in the legislature in Ohio, we have a tendency to agree on about more than 90% of everything we debate and vote on. It's the less than 10% that you read about in the headlines, because that's where it's much more exciting. It's much more apparently newsworthy to talk about what we disagree about than talk about the things we agree on. And that's a shame.
It is a shame. And I also think that's why maybe mainstream news has the same traction that it used to either.
Could be. I also think it's good because of the money involved or whatever, we've lost the local news that we used to have. But what I'm very encouraged by is seeing small, independent, little news outlets popping up everywhere. And we're getting back to hearing about some of the good news that's happening in our local communities, which is wonderful.
Right, because you want it to be authentic, you want it to be true. And, it's people get their news from social a lot of times and they don't go deeper. And we want to make sure that there's some positive out there.
I agree.
So, I see a lot of things happening in the schools, and we're all, many people, including myself, is very concerned about, a lot of the violence we're seeing at school and how it just seems to be escalating. And we were, when it first started, it was like just an episode here or there. And now it seems so mainstream. And I'm really concerned. What's your take on it?
A couple of things. First of all, I'm glad that we started talking about schools in general. So I also serve the 23rd Senate District, which is up in Northeast Ohio. But I also serve as the Democratic leader for the Senate. And I always tell people that once you become a legislator and you work on issues, policies, the budget, we're really doing things that affects the 11.8 million Ohioans. And so while my district sent me to the legislature, once I'm working there, we're working on behalf of everyone in the state of Ohio. And so when we talk about schools, what's the safety is absolutely important. We've done some work over the years to try to provide some resources for our schools to be able to, sort of make them safer locations. I still believe that part of a good plan for safety in our schools is safety in our communities, and it comes down to, on one hand, providing mental health services for folks who are struggling, because we know that often if someone takes to creating any kind of violence in the schools, it manifests itself in some kind of mental health issue a lot of times. So this governor has been very good at really identifying mental health care as an important resource that we need to make sure is available to not just our young people and our children, but also families across the state. So I think we continue to work on that. There's also just a level of engaging people in alternative behaviors to violence. And I think that along with mental health kinds of issues, I think also getting young people especially involved in activities, in understanding how to interact with each other. I think sometimes we are so keyed into our devices that we forget that we have to teach kids and young people how to engage with each other in person. And that also involves how to deal with conflict sometimes, and that violence should never be the response to conflict, but it often is. And so I think there are definitely some things that we're seeing, some models around the state. There are definitely actions that we can take that move people in an alternative direction to that. I'm also very concerned about our schools in terms of providing fair funding for them so that all our public schools, no matter whether you're urban, rural, suburban, exurban, if you're out in exurbia, that the funding is there to be able to give them all the resources they need, have access to the best teachers that we can find. And we are in a debate about that in the legislature right now. Now, a lot of people have heard about the vouchers that have been provided for private and religious-based schools. And look, I think that is, we got to be careful. It's okay. It's okay for people to have choice. We are supportive of choice across the board. The problem is if we're taking so much money from the public schools providing these vouchers, and what we're seeing right now is that the vouchers are paying for people who are already sending their kids to the private school, and it's just helping them pay a different portion. And honestly, some of those schools, those private schools, are starting to increase their tuition because they know there's a voucher. That wasn't what anyone intended. I think that's an unintended consequence. What I think is really important is that all of our kids in the state of Ohio get the opportunity for a level playing field. That starts with us fully funding public schools and encouraging all of the activities and the things, resources that they need so that they can compete we're in a global economy right now. They need to learn how to use computers, how to do all the tech that's there, and get them prepared for the best kinds of jobs that they can. We've even come together actually in the legislature on trying to provide just access to the internet, because there's still areas around the state of Ohio that don't have access. So there's a lot of work that we have to do, but I think we just have to work through it apparently, which we'll continue to do, but fully funding our public schools has to be a priority because it's our future. Our kids are our future.
Oh, absolutely. And to be honest, I'm sending my kids to a private school, and if
Mhm.
it wasn't for the voucher, we wouldn't have her in that.
Sure.
And we just kind of wanted a different environment.
Mhm.
And, but it is kind of concerning about when you turn on TV, you see something else happening and somewhere else happening. And then it's just like, wow, this is happening so much. And I know with a lot of diverse populations, mental health is seen quite differently and treated quite differently.
Well, yeah, and you bring up a really good point because part of the reason why for many of us, and look, I used to be for the first 10 years of my professional life, I was a teacher for kids with special needs. And what we know is that often private and charter schools can say no to kids who have special needs.
Mhm.
And that means they're in the public schools, which again is fine. We worked a long time to make sure that they weren't sitting at home, not in school. So we're happy they're in school. Now, those parents and the kids need all the resources available to help those kids reach their highest potential.
Mhm.
And again, in many of the areas of Ohio, when you really get out there into some of the rural areas, the public schools are everyone's only hope and their
Mhm.
best hope, and we should be doing everything we can for those kids too.
Absolutely. I just did a recent podcast of a researcher that does rural Ohio in the region and all the economic stimulus and how there's hardly any schools out there and even colleges, the online. So if you get a degree, unless you work from home, I mean, where are you going to take it? That's the
Yeah,
tough part. And people
yeah,
do want to do better for their families and make more money, but then that's got limitations on its own right there.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's super hard.
Yes, it is.
But, how do you see the future of schools in your mind, in your vision?
Well, almost every week I go and visit a school in my district somewhere, and every once in a while somebody invites me to a school that's not in my district, but if I can figure out how to go, I will go. And all you have to do is go in and spend some time listening to the kids, seeing these teachers who are amazing. I have, high hopes for the future of our schools. But we have to be able to give them the resources they need. And just like everything is more expensive for us, it's more expensive for the schools as well. And look,
Mhm.
I was a teacher. I know what it was like to have to pay for things out of my own pocket to make sure that my kids in my classroom had what we needed. And we don't expect that from doctors and lawyers and business people. We don't expect them to pay for some of the materials that they need to do their jobs. We shouldn't expect it from our teachers either. And again, there is so much amazing stuff happening, and everything is so fast now. I mean, kids are picking up things faster. If you want your computer set up or fixed, who do you hand it to? Somebody who's way younger than you are, right? And so our kids in Ohio are smart and engaged and excited. We just need to keep helping them on that path.
What was your take on, there's a lot more millennials getting older and kind of migrating into a different stage in their life, right? So I have experienced this recently with my mother passing, just the whole elder care experience and the challenges that go with being a caregiver and then some. What is your vision for that?
Well, I'm really glad you asked that. Often when we're talking about the budget, one of the things that I know I ask my members, we ask ourselves is what are we doing for different populations? We just talked about our youngest part of the population, our kids. Often I ask, what are we doing for seniors? Because as you said, not just the millennials, but the baby boomers are a huge group that are now turning into their late 60s, 70s, and they're living longer. And so the senior population is growing. We have done stuff over the years in a bipartisan way, which gives me great joy, that we've worked on things like fraud and abuse for our seniors, making sure that the resources are there. We've put folks into each county to be able to inspect and look into any of those charges of abuse for our senior citizens. So that's the positive. There's still more that we're trying to do. We're trying to something that affects all of us, but especially affects seniors is the cost of property taxes. We've worked very hard. So we have a program that actually stops the rise of property taxes. It's called the Homestead Act, and a whole lot of folks are included in that. We keep trying to raise the threshold. I personally, if I were queen of the world, I would actually just lift the cap on the Homestead Act and have it there for all folks once they get over a certain age, because and we could gradually increase it by age. But to just reduce their property taxes because of the fact that the longer you live, you're on a fixed income, and the more costly other things become, especially accessing healthcare. And so we're still working on trying to make the Homestead Act more affordable, more available to more people. It's something we continue to work on. 2 years ago, we added veterans. We've raised the threshold for that to it's not quite, the property value isn't quite 200,000, but I think we're going there, and we need to, because let's face it, the property values have just gone through the roof recently, and so that really affects seniors. The other thing, I was talking to some folks the other day, and we're starting to see more programs for people who are trying to age in place, live in their homes, and then also access services. And maybe it's someone who has early onset of Alzheimer's or some other issue that they have a family member who's caring for them but needs to go to work during the day. And so we're starting to see some more of those kinds of programs pop up. Often parts of them can be paid for with Medicaid. And so, we're looking at, are there models out there that could benefit more folks in the state of Ohio as an alternative to a nursing home? Because one of the things we know, nursing homes are there, those long-term care facilities are there for people who absolutely need them or need them to rehab and then come home. But people fare better in the long run if they can stay in their homes. And so the longer we can keep folks in their home, the higher their quality of life really is.
Now, what about when someone is not quite at the income level of that to get that program and they're a little bit higher and they're kind of stuck in that in between spot,
Yeah.
right? What do you do when you're kind of sandwiched in? It's heartbreaking.
Well, I'm not an expert at that, but I know that there are folks who actually, a lot of folks go to professionals who help them figure out how to manage that kind of a thing, to be able to have access to as many services are available to them dealing with their income levels. It is something that's very tricky as people get older and is a big concern. But I think if we can start at the place of, if someone wants to stay in their home, being able to stay in their home as long as possible and give them some of the resources and the breaks around the outside edges, I think that's the best we can do. To me, that's a group of people that definitely deserve a tax break.
I do too, because, and I had a mentor and he was very concerned because he's like, I'm spending $4,000 a week here. And he's like, I'm gonna have nothing left. And
Yeah.
and they weren't really attending to him. And I had to call and be like, what's the problem? Why are you not answering his buzzer?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was too bad to be not to be home. You know what I mean? Like the home wasn't
Yeah.
gonna work out.
Well, and one of the pieces of legislation I worked on, it's called Esther's Law, was for family members who had people in long-term uh, care facilities
Yeah.
to be able to install a camera so that they would not only be able to communicate with their loved one, which is wonderful. You
Yeah.
think about it, if you can have a little iPad in the room and at certain times be able to check in and say, hi, how you doing and all that, but also be able to monitor the care that your loved one is receiving. And we passed that legislation a number of years ago. It's a bipartisan piece, and I think it's really made a difference for it reassuring family members, but also making sure that their loved one is getting the best care possible. Yeah.
Absolutely. When I called the nurse and I was like, why aren't you calling him back? They're like, oh, he hit it a couple times. We just think it's nothing. And I'm like, the guy died 3 days later. I'm like, it's something. You know,
Oh,
it was
yeah.
just really heartbreaking to
Yeah.
have that because I didn't really think he should have been treated that way.
Yeah.
So I know that I have done some campaigns for some other folks that have the elder care
Mhm.
aspect of it. And I know that memory care is really, really a growing area. And I think it's almost like a space where families don't know how to plan for that because,
Sure.
you got the diagnosis of Alzheimer's or
Mhm.
dementia. I mean, obviously you go through different stages, but it's it can be very challenging on what to do.
Well, it really can. I mean, what we didn't, my family went through, not the memory care aspect. I have dear friends that are going through that right now, but what we went through with one of my parents, my father, was he was healthy and then he wasn't.
Yeah,
And the issues just increased very quickly for him. And there was a point where we had to make a decision of he was in the hospital. Does he come back home or does he go to hospice care? And I have to tell you, it's one of the most difficult decisions that any of us ever made was saying, based on all the information that the doctors gave us, that we really needed to have him go to hospice care. I think for memory care and things like that, it's the same thing in terms of how difficult it is to make the decision that there has to be some kind of a change. And while we don't have legislation around this, I think what we do have is making sure that those facilities that are caring for our loved ones are of the best quality. And that's where the Inspector General and some of the other aspects of providing and protecting our seniors really come into play.
absolutely. I think both groups that we've kind of discussed have their own challenges, but they're both fragile in their own kind
They're
of
vulnerable, right?
And I think that we do want to take care because they're the people either that we love or we admire or people we have connections with in some capacity. And we want to make sure that it's a good experience. And someone shouldn't have to worry about panic about the money in a bed. You know what I mean?
The pragmatic part of me says, and guess what, in terms of elder care, we're all going to be there someday.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think it's really, I lost my mother to complications from a stroke when she
Um,
was 71,
so sorry.
and which, as far as I'm concerned right now, was much too young for her to pass, and I miss her every day. But one of the things I've done in the legislature is work on um, preventative kind of things, anything we can do to improve stroke care because of experiencing that loss through her. And I think it's we can always be better and do better. And I think it's important. It's one of the wonderful things about being a legislator is that I do get to work on things that I believe in, that I believe are important, and make some kind of a positive change that I hope will definitely outlast my service, but will really help improve the lives of people in the state of Ohio. It's an amazing thing to be able to do that. It's very humbling, but it's also just a wonderful part of the job.
So looking back, fondly about your mom, was there any like lesson that you bring over to while you're at your job now that she's taught you?
when I was pretty young and started questioning everything, she told me I should be a lawyer when I when I grew up, and I was like, not quite a lawyer, but certainly we work on a lot of public policy. What I learned from my mom, she worked very hard her whole life. She provided. My parents got divorced when I was young, and from my mom, what I got was just perseverance, and celebration. She made every birthday and holiday a celebration. There was a lot of decorations, cookie making, all the rest of it that I tried to pass down to my kids as well. But she definitely enjoyed life, and taught me. I think the thing that I walked away with the most was to always be true to myself. Because at the end of the day, you have to look yourself in the mirror. You have to believe in what you're doing. And I think the other part was, and work to leave things better than you found them. And
Yeah.
I know it's a Girl Scout quote, but it's also something I definitely try to do, and have tried to teach my children as well.
Well, I think that's a pretty good lesson, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
can all learn from that one. And I think that's kind of her way, having that, I don't know, her memory
Yeah,
honoring that. That's pretty cool.
I agree. Well, thanks again.
If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please hit subscribe so you can get notified when new content comes out. Please share this with anyone who could be inspired by it, and feel free to post any questions so we can be inspired by new content. Thanks for listening. If you're interested in learning more, visit our website at bakercreative.co.